Well, Bo Nix was nothing short of spectacular in his first year as a Duck, and entering year 2, he can still get better. Here we go.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks. If you haven't already, please like, comment, subscribe, rate, review the show wherever you listen to or watch it. Those of you watching on YouTube can see we've got this guy who you may not have heard of, but his name is Max Chadwick. He is a PFF College Football Analyst and host of the Preferred Walk-On show. Max, it is great to have you on. Thank you so much for coming on to talk about our favorite Oregon quarterback, well, at least right now.
Yeah, thank you, man. They for sure do not know who I am, for anyone that we were saying that. But yeah, man, I'm super pumped to talk to you. I know we threw this together really last second, but I am ultra excited to be able to talk to you about, your favorite quarterback for right now.
Yeah, well, he's definitely the quarterback that is most at the top of Oregon fans' minds at this point in time. So I want to go in depth and draw on your knowledge of working at PFF as to what you kind of see from Bo Nix, and we'll get to where he can improve in just a sec. But he was so good last year. He set the Oregon single season completion percentage record at just under 72%. That's higher even than what Mariota did in his Heisman campaign in 2014. He was remarkably efficient. He was very productive, led Oregon to a 10-win season. What was the jump from Auburn to Oregon that you saw from him that allowed him to be the best version of himself?
Oh, 1,000%. He became one of the best quarterbacks in college football. And if you remember at Auburn, he was like, I hate to say it, he was kind of like a laughingstock. A lot of people were making fun of this guy. He's a former 5-star recruit. So obviously a ton of hype coming into Auburn. Then he wasn't really great at Auburn, to put it frankly. And when he transferred to Oregon, there were a lot of people like, oh, Oregon's not going to be able to do much because they have Bo Nix at quarterback. And then he turned into a top 5 quarterback in college football, really, and he was phenomenal. And the big thing I think changed was that he became a much more accurate passer. But more than that, I think his decision making was excellent this past season. We actually have a stat at PFF called adjusted completion percentage, which basically is your completion percentage plus any drops that your receivers have. And across his 3 years at Auburn, his adjusted completion percentage was like 70%, which was 108th among FBS quarterbacks. This past season, it was over 80%, which was second in the nation and led the Power 5. So really accurate. He took the deep balls when they were there, but when they weren't there, he didn't force it and he threw short passes. I think Kenny Dillingham, who of course departed now as the Arizona State head coach, I think he was phenomenal as Bo Nix's offensive coordinator. He actually worked with Bo Nix in his true freshman season at Auburn too, as his offensive coordinator. So I think that really helped. We'll see how he looks with Will Stein now, who comes over from UTSA. But yeah, I think he just looked like a complete different quarterback because he's in a new system, and he was taking what was there and he wasn't forcing it like he was at Auburn, really.
Yeah, the moniker Bo Picks, I think, had kind of chased him around the college football circles down there in Auburn country for really all 3 of his seasons while he was there. And Oregon fans remember, it's pretty ironic he came to Oregon because his first college football game was against Oregon in 2019. All the hype, all the pomp, all the circumstance, and he very much looked like a true freshman. I don't think he threw for that many yards, but he used his legs, made some big plays, threw a couple of picks, and Auburn unfortunately ended up winning that game. Oregon should. I don't need to go down that rabbit hole. So that's how his career began. But now he's going to end his career as an Oregon Duck because college football makes no sense. Now, like, this is the world that we live in. This is what we got. People could say, I don't like it. I don't like this. Like, well, too bad, I guess. This is where we're at. So going into this year, Max, he made those strides with his decision making, became a more accurate passer. Frankly, he looked like the 5-star quarterback prospect that he was coming out of high school, that he never really looked like, except for, a brief few moments at Auburn when, he forced the issue and made the spectacular play. But it looked to me like he had a better supporting cast. He had a better offensive line for sure. Wasn't under duress nearly as often. But I think Bo would be the first guy to tell you, because he, from what I've seen, is a very humble guy and a really good dude and knows that he wants to continue to improve. Where can he continue to improve?
That's a good question, because I really do think he was phenomenal last season. So it's hard to look at last year's tape and really pick out any warts and say, oh, this is where you got to get better. I hate to sound like I'm going back on myself, but like the decision-making part, because I think he was terrific as a decision maker. But I do think there was some element of the magic that he had at times at Auburn. Remember that LSU play he had, I think in 2021, where he was running around back there. I told him in the interview, I was like, dude, that is the coolest play I've ever seen a quarterback make. And he was like, yeah, it was pretty awesome. But that really didn't happen too much at Oregon, which I think is a double-edged sword in that, he did that a lot at Auburn, and it turned out to be an interception. Where that play, it turned out to be a really good play. I think decision-making, Patrick Mahomes, I don't want to compare him to it. Patrick Mahomes does that and always seems to make the right play out of that. I think if Bo Nix has that ability to run around back there, make a backyard football play, and not just be a pure pocket passer. I know he was a good runner for Oregon last year, but I think he played a lot more within the pocket. And there were times where I was like, man, I wish he just, make something magic happen at Oregon. So maybe, decision-making in terms of, knowing when to break out of the pocket and maybe make some more of those magical plays, at least for me, just to want to see more of those unbelievable plays he had. But yeah, maybe playing more from outside the pocket, I think, could be something good. But otherwise, I think he really was terrific last year, and I'm excited for him. I really am. I hope he keeps up this decision making even without Kenny Dillingham, which I think is a major loss. And we'll see how he looks without Kenny Dillingham and with Will Stein. But I hope he kind of keeps that same mindset with Will Stein that he did last year with Kenny Dillingham.
Yeah, I've described that as Bo's biggest test going into this year is his most productive seasons, not necessarily his most efficient one, but his most productive seasons and his best seasons have come when Kenny Dillingham has been his OC. Now, Dillingham wasn't his play caller in 2019, but still, it's not as if the offensive coordinator is uninvolved with how the offense is run, figuring out a game plan, talking to the quarterback. And Dillingham was also the quarterback's coach. So there isn't another voice. Oregon fans may remember on those Chip Kelly staffs, Chip was the head coach and the play caller, but Mark Helfrich was the offensive coordinator. Scott Frost was actually the quarterback's coach. All of those voices come together to influence a quarterback, to talk to him after he does something well, talk to him after he makes a mistake, what he can improve upon, how you want to implement this, that, and the other thing, and, yada, yada, yada. So I think that that's a test for him, but I do feel, Max, that he is perhaps most set up to be able to handle something like that this year because he's going into year 5, and he's not just a fifth-year college football player. He's a fifth-year starter. He's been a starter every year of his college career, so I think that that's a legitimate hurdle, but I think he's most set up to succeed for it because he's just played so much football.
Absolutely. And like you said, he's been such an experienced quarterback. Like you said, year 5 as a starting quarterback at the Power 5 level is absolutely ridiculous. Kind of like Jaden Daniels in a lot of ways too. Jaden Daniels also going into year 5 as a Power 5 starter.
Dorian Thompson-Robinson, another one in the Pac-12
exactly,
from this past year.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just absolutely insane that these guys, this COVID year, I actually talked to him about that. I was like, hey, why'd you want to come back? And he was saying, when I got this COVID year, I wanted to give it my best shot in college football because I knew the NFL is always going to be there. And I knew it would be there after I'm done with college football. I really wanted to give it my best chance at college football. That's why he came back ultimately to Oregon for his redshirt senior season now. So yeah, man, I'm excited for him. And also he's got a really good supporting cast at Oregon. That receiving core I ranked as one of the top 10 receiving cores in college football. I had him at number 7. I think Tez Johnson is going to be a big time addition for them. And also he's Bo Nix's adopted brother, which is like, they're going to have chemistry from day one. So sometimes you worry about, how's a transfer receiver going to look with his new quarterback?
No issue there.
They've been throwing together in the backyard forever. I think that's one of the coolest stories in college football. And also, Bucky Irving, I think, is a top 5 running back in the country, too. So I think he's got a great supporting cast in that offense. I am a little concerned about how he'll look without Dillingham, but I think he grew and matured so much last year that he can kind of be, Will Stein calls him Coach Bo. That's his nickname for him because he's kind of like an offensive coordinator on the field for Oregon. I think he'll be able to adjust to this new offense with Will Stein.
Yeah, well, we're all betting on Bo Nix having another good season, but just how good can it be? You can bet that at FanDuel because they've got FanDuel odds over there for the Heisman Trophy. Bo Nix, top 10 in the country, by the way. Tied for the 7th best odds. So if you want to get in on that or anything else, go check out FanDuel. You can take your first swing at betting Major League Baseball on FanDuel and get 10 times your first bet amount in bonus bets up to $200. Just bet $20, you'll land $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. That's $200. You can bet on everything from the money line to the over-under to who's going to hit the first home run to is Bo Nix going to win the Heisman and should I bet more than $20 on? Maybe you should. I don't know. That's your call, Oregon fans. There's no better place to bet Major League Baseball than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Sign up today. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. Get up to $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball. All right, so everydayer Oregon fans out there expect me normally to mute my microphone temporarily and take a sip of water, but Max and I had to somewhat come up with this episode on the fly, so to speak, to make our schedules work. I didn't even have time to do that, but guess what? We're hydrated this morning and powering through. So let's get back into it. Max, Bo Nix is, I think, set up to have a really good season this year. You mentioned the receiving core, and I wanted to ask you about that because there are a lot of different ways I could see this receiving core playing out, and I think Troy Franklin is just a bona fide #1. I think he's one of the best receivers Oregon's had in the last 15 years. Probably going to be the highest drafted Oregon receiver in a long time. But after Troy Franklin, there's this kind of aura of mystery around, okay, who's the #2? Because your second leading receiver from last year, Chris Hudson, is back on the roster. But Tez Johnson, in theory, is playing a similar position. And then you have Trayshawn Holden from Alabama. Like, I love the talent. I love the depth. I feel good if we've got injuries. I feel good if we want to put 5 wide receivers on the field. I think there are a lot of different ways that Will Stein and company can go about all of that. But what do you like specifically about this Oregon receiving core? And is Tez Johnson, you think, going to be one of the premier players there?
I think he will. I love this receiving core. Again, I think I ranked it #7 in the country. I think Troy Franklin, like you mentioned, he could be a first-round pick ultimately in the NFL draft. He's got to put on some weight. He's like 6'3", 180-ish pounds.
He's bulked up a little bit, at least from what I saw in the spring game. I can check his official spring weight, but
that's fantastic because that's the big thing with him is that there's going to be questions about him getting off press coverage at that size. Tez Johnson, size is an issue for him. He's a smaller receiver, but he's an electric receiver. And obviously, I don't think he'll be as good as he was at Troy. He was actually the second highest graded wide receiver in the country last year at Troy. And he had the second most yards per route run at Troy as well last year. So I think it's more than just a feel-good story of him playing with Bo Nix. He actually is a big-time get for Oregon. And what's funny is Bo told me in the interview, he said what's cool is when they were home, they played together in high school. And when Tez moved into their house, Tez's dream was to play for Oregon. It wasn't to play for Troy or Auburn or anything like that. And he didn't get an offer from Oregon coming out of high school. Obviously, it's amazing now he's transferring to Oregon, fulfilling his dream, and also his adopted brother somehow made it to Oregon as well. Like that I think is an unbelievable. You can't write a script better than that. And then you mentioned Chris Hudson, terrific after the catch last year. He had 300 yards after the catch. Terrence Ferguson is back at tight end too. I thought he was a good tight end for them last year.
That's my guy right there. I'm a big T-Ferg fan. Big. Real quick. I've been on this train for the last couple of seasons. T-Ferg is an NFL kind of guy, right?
I think he is. I definitely think he is. I mean, he had the 4th most yards after the catch among Pac-12 tight ends last year. I think he was really good. And they mentioned Trayshawn Holden. I'm excited about him too. He had like 300 yards at Alabama too, which is impressive. And then to top it all off, you have the #2 receiver in the 2023 class in Jurion Dickey coming in. So you have a 5-star recruit at wide receiver coming in. That's your #4 receiver? Like that
we don't even know.
Yeah, we don't even know, man. Jurion Dickey.
Even know.
I'm excited for Jurion Dickey, man, and he might be able to make an impact as a true freshman at Oregon. So, yeah, that receiving core I think is special and is certainly not the best in the Pac-12 because I think USC does very slightly edge him out. And then also I think Washington has the #3 receiving core in the country with those two, Rome Odunze and Jalen McMillan they have there. But after that, I think Oregon is a 3rd best receiving core in the Pac-12 and a top 10 receiving core in the country.
Yeah, I love the weapons. I'm glad you mentioned Bucky Irving earlier too, because I think that beyond Irving, they also have great depth at running back with Noah Whittington, Jordan
Yep.
James, true freshman Dante Dowdell in there in the mix probably as well. I think that's more than good enough. It'll come down to the offensive line,
Yep.
because there's a lot of turnover there. They were really highly graded a season ago, but on paper, I think you have just about all the tools, other than that offensive line question, for Bo Nix to have a productive season. Now, in last week's episode, when I laid out the case or the path for Bo Nix to potentially win the Heisman Trophy this season, I said it's possible, not likely per se. Like, he's got the seventh best odds going into this season for a reason. It is foreseeable, but a number of things would have to go right. I think Oregon would have to make the college football playoff. Oregon's never had a Heisman finalist when they haven't been in the national championship picture. LaMichael and then Mariota, of course, who won it in 2014. So I think you have to have that component. But the other stat that I found was each of the last three quarterbacks to win, Bryce Young and Joe Burrow and why am I just suddenly blanking?
Caleb Williams.
And Caleb Williams.
Yeah.
The most recent. How did I forget the most recent one? I don't know. Anyway.
He's a Pac-12 rival. I guess you don't want to.
yeah. I don't even want to think about that. That doesn't even count. Yeah. Anyway, so each of those guys have thrown for 4,000 yards as passers in their Heisman Trophy winning season. So I think that benchmark would probably need to be hit. Bo also has to have, I think, the right sequence of events take place. You got to have big games, big performances, maybe a Heisman moment or two. That all wouldn't hurt, but I think that there is enough talent in the receiving core around him. You think of, who did Caleb Williams have last year? First round receiver in Jordan Addison and a bunch of other really, really good ones. Who did Joe Burrow have? Two of the five best wide receivers in the NFL, right here, right now. Yeah. Who did Bryce Young have? Like a bunch of talent, in that room. I think the talent is enough for Bo to hit that 4,000 yard threshold in 2023. It'll come down to, what is each game requiring? What's the game plan? What's the mindset? What's the approach? Because Oregon still is going to want to run the football, and I think it'll, depend on how much they decide to throw, how much they want Bo, or how much they need him to throw the football maybe. But last year was still very much, correct me if I'm wrong, a run-first team that had a play-action downfield shot component to it, but they are not a pass-first offense.
Yeah, and I think Bucky coming back could hurt him a little because I do think Bucky Irving is a special running back in college football. But I do think that Bo has a chance. And I think, the Heisman Trophy is very much, as much as it is about stats, of course, it is also a narrative-based award. And I think one of the coolest narratives in college football could be, the Bo picks going to be one of the best quarterbacks in the country, which he is right now. And I think that roller coaster that he's been on could make for a very enticing story. Now, of course, he did break out last year, so it would be year two of being a great quarterback. But I still think there's a story there of, Bo Nix going from a guy that everyone was laughing at to now all of a sudden a guy that you have to really consider as one of the top quarterbacks in the country. You mentioned the receiving core. That's going to help him out a lot. You mentioned how all those Heisman winners had, superstar receivers, Bryce Young and Jameson Williams. Burrow had Chase and Jefferson. And then obviously Caleb had Jordan Addison, Mario Williams, and a bunch of other guys last year too. But yeah, I think that. And also, man, I think what really helps Bo's case, the Pac-12 is going to be under the spotlight a lot this year. I mean, that is a loaded conference. I cannot wait to watch the Pac-12. Maybe they'll beat up on each other and kick itself out of the playoff.
We're so doing that, Max. We're doing that.
I keep predicting a Pac-12 team to make the playoff, and I'm like, I don't want to do it though because they're just going to beat up on each other. But you got Michael Penix Jr., you got Caleb Williams, you got Bo Nix. That's three of the top five quarterbacks in the country, all in the same conference. And yeah, that all of them. I mean, they're all going to have explosive offenses next year. So I cannot wait to watch Pac-12 after dark. I think Heisman voters will actually tune in because you remember a lot of those Heisman voters are up there in age. They might actually tune in now. They might be like, all right, we have to watch this game. I think that's why Christian McCaffrey didn't win the Heisman Trophy. They didn't watch this game. They're like, we don't want to watch him, and then ended up breaking Barry Sanders' record, and yet Derrick Henry still won that award. I don't love that, but I think this year they will watch a lot of these games, and I think the Pac-12 being under the spotlight and finally being up there this year at least with the Big Ten and the SEC. It's going to be an electric conference, and I think it helps Bo Nix a lot because a lot of his games are going to be some of the premier games in college football.
Yeah, I think two things on points you touched on there. First of all, the Pac-12 is 100% cannibalizing itself. I host Locked On Pac-12. For those who don't know, that's what we're plugging to watch next down there. That is 1,000. I think USC is really good. I think Oregon is good. I think Washington is good. I think Utah is good. I don't know
State
that
is sneaky too.
Oregon State is good.
Yeah.
I don't know that any of those teams is 12-1 good, which is what you need. You have to go 12, and I'm just like, I don't know if they're that dominant or if they're going to be able to get through. We're just going to do what we call in the Pac-12 the circle of suck. Last year, the circle was complete. You had Oregon losing to Washington, and then Washington losing to Arizona State, and Arizona State losing to like UCLA or somebody. You just keep going. You can just go around and around, and it's just this funny flowchart that we do every year. But as you were talking about Bo Nix and the story and the narrative, which I completely agree with, you know who I thought of is Joe Burrow. Because Joe Burrow, people may not remember this, won the Heisman and put together probably the greatest college football team we've ever seen in year 2. I'm not saying Oregon's going to do that, but the idea that it doesn't have the same impact of making an impact in year 1 as a transfer. Like I don't know. Like I saw year 2, LSU was good the previous year. If they step it up another year, you never know. So, and the second thing is Christian McCaffrey was robbed of the Heisman Trophy. That is
absolutely horrible.
That is the greatest travesty in the history of that trophy, and to me it's not even close.
Yeah,
to me it is
like 50 carries a game, and it was like, oh, he had 200 yards. Like, because he had 45 carries. Like, it's like,
to me it was even worse than the NCAA pulling Reggie Bush's Heisman, which is its own conversation.
Yeah.
But McCaffrey not getting the Heisman, ridiculous. It bothers me to this day because he was so clearly the best player in college football and was not even close.
Yep.
But anyway, so SEC bias is a real thing. And I also agree with what you said that Bo Nix is going to be playing in a lot of high-profile games. I mean, we've got Washington on the schedule. We have USC. We have Utah. We have Oregon State. All 4 of those games could have college football playoff, Pac-12 championship implications and are just going to be big-time matchups because you're going to have those sorts of teams, and you need those sorts of games. Right? If you think back to Mariota's Heisman season, who did we play in the non-conference? Then top 10 Michigan State. It was a top 10 battle. I think it was the big noon kickoff game. I think it was a big noon kickoff game because Gus Johnson was on the call for that as he always is. So you had a big game there in Michigan State. I don't think we played at USC that year, but you just keep good. UCLA was ranked and they were good, and Arizona was really good that year, and you just kind of be able to have those sorts of games to get on people's radar and to have them watch in person so they can think, boy, yeah, that guy really is something there. But Bo Nix is turning himself into something in the eyes of a lot of NFL draft scouts. I think that going into last year didn't have a ton of value. Maybe had some value as a draft prospect, but could have gotten taken. He's 6'2", he's mobile, he's got a good arm. That can usually get you at least drafted. But he did a lot for himself in the eyes of the NFL a season ago, and he could do, I think, an even greater service to himself in the eyes of the NFL community if he puts together another season like he did last year.
I think he absolutely can. And that was actually a point I made to him. I was like, man, you're one of the top quarterbacks in the 2024 draft. Like, how does that feel? He goes, man, it's cool to just be talked about again. Because he literally said, it's cool that I'm relevant again. Because before, when he transferred from Auburn to Oregon, like I mentioned before, I mean, there was a question among even like Oregon fans about, man, is this guy really the starter? And we have Ty Thompson, 5-star recruit. Maybe he could be the guy. And then obviously Bo breaks out and becomes this awesome quarterback. And, of course, comes back to next year. And, I'm not a NFL draft analyst for PFF, but Trevor Sikkema is. He's our lead draft analyst. He has Bo Nix as his number 3 quarterback in the draft right now behind Caleb Williams and behind Drake May. And I know for a fact he thinks Drake May and Bo Nix are very, very close to each other.
Really?
Yes. He originally in his first video when he put this out, he had Bo at 2. Then a week or 2 later when he had to write up the article, he said he switched his mind. But I mean, if he had Bo at 2 originally, I think there's a chance that, it was a lot closer than people think. So, yeah, I think Bo Nix, man, he's got the arm. He's got the talent to, like I said, run around back there and make some magic happen. I think Bo Nix, another elite season of, good decision-making like he showed last year, could be a first-round pick ultimately in the NFL draft. And I think right now, according to Trevor Sikkema, at least he thinks he is, the number 3 quarterback in the draft behind Caleb Williams and Drake May, who might be the first 2 picks of the NFL draft next year.
Yeah, I mean, the conversation for the quarterbacks next year is, hey, these are no-brainer franchise guys in Caleb. I mean, I'm ridiculously high on Caleb Williams. Like, I'm all in on the hype train there. I'm a Seahawks fan. I would rather we tank and get Caleb Williams than go forward and think Geno Smith is going to continue to be, what he was a season ago, leading the league in completion percentage or something like that. Like, I feel like that's closer to being an anomaly, and Williams' upside is Mahomes. That is the comp, and I think it's a fair comp. The throws that Williams can make, nobody but Mahomes and Josh Allen, maybe Herbert, I think could fall into that category as well. But he's athletic. He's crazy good, and it's always been Williams and May. And I am really surprised to hear you say that Trevor's got Bo Nix number 2 ahead of Drake May, because the narrative that I have long seen, and frankly what I would think as a very highly, incredibly, ridiculously amateur NFL draft expert, is that it's Williams, it's May, there's a gap, and then there are other guys in there. But Trevor's got him ahead of Michael Penix at Washington, who I know is flying up draft boards after the season he had in Seattle last season as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And he has Drake May number 2. But like I said, originally he had Bo Nix, which caused a major firestorm on social media when he put that out. And maybe he went back on it and goes, maybe. So right now he does have Drake May number 2. But like I said, 2 weeks ago he had Bo Nix number 2. So I think it really is like a coin flip for Trevor. I agree with you. I think it's Caleb by a mile. I think it's Drake number 2 by a mile. And then after that, take your pick with who you want after that. But yeah, man, I think Bo is definitely in that conversation for number 3. And yeah, I think he ultimately another great season, which I think is probably in the cards. Could be a first-round pick, which if you told me 2 years ago Bo Nix is going to be a first-round pick,
no way,
absolutely insane.
Yeah,
this arc that he's had is awesome, and that goes back to the Heisman conversation. I mean, the story of this guy that's why you love college football, man, because it produces, I think, the best stories in sports. Bo Nix is going to have an awesome story if he can be a first-round pick after what he went through at Auburn his first 3 years.
It was tumultuous. It was chaotic. It was expectation-ridden. It was disappointment. It was turnover. It was a lot of really negative things. And if he were to play himself into being a first-round quarterback, I think that'd be a reflection on him. It'd be a reflection on Oregon as well, and what Dan Lanning has done here so far with the Ducks. I think that would be that would really be something. And I mean, it can depend on factors outside of Bo's control. Who wants a quarterback, who needs a quarterback. But I mean, we see more than 2 taken in the first round every year, and it'd be pretty neat to see Bo Nix being taken in the first round, because I didn't have that expectation of him when he came to Oregon. I don't think a lot of Oregon fans had that sort of expectation. And I think, just real quick, between him and Penix, I think it's a preference thing for that NFL team. I think Bo brings you a little bit more upside with regards to his mobility. Penix has had some injuries. He can move, but he's not fast. Bo Nix is a fast, mobile quarterback. I think Penix is slightly more accurate from the pocket.
Yeah, I agree with that. The big thing with Penix, and I had put out a way too early mock draft for PFF after the 2023 draft was over, and I had Penix at QB3. But I think NFL teams are going to be terrified of him, man, because he is a 6-year player, first of all. Second of all, he had 2 torn ACLs at Indiana. He had a shoulder injury at Indiana. Obviously, phenomenal last year in his first year at Washington. He like Bo Nix, transferred to the Pac-12 and was phenomenal in his first year there. But yeah, I had him as QB3, but I think Bo's talent is more than him. I think Penix is more polished probably than Bo Nix right now, and maybe a safer bet than Bo Nix right now. Because I am, like I said, the Dillingham thing scares me a little bit with Bo. But otherwise, man, I think the injuries are going to play a huge factor in Penix, unfortunately. And I think NFL teams are going to be terrified by a 6th-year player who is coming off 2 torn ACLs, also a shoulder injury. I mean, this guy has a litany of medical issues. So Bo Nix does not have that, thankfully. He had 1 season-ending injury a year ago. I think it was a foot injury, but other than that, not too much to write home about. But yeah, Michael Penix Jr., I think the injury history, unfortunately, could play a big part in his evaluation.
Yeah, I mean, you gave him a good offensive lineup there in Washington. Suddenly he was able to sit there and, pick teams apart
right,
when he had all when he had all day to throw. And Oregon fans remember that very well because we couldn't get any pressure on him. But if he's going to the Chicago Bears, who can never get an offensive line right, that might be a problem. Now if he were going to the Cowboys, maybe less of a problem there. But it's unfortunate that sort of stuff comes into play. It could work to Bo's benefit that he doesn't have as big of a history there because the guys in the NFL are the biggest, fastest, and the strongest of what you have in college football. But I don't think that drops Penix out of the first round because I think you saw hey, if we give him a support, he did stay healthy for an entire season. Look at what he did. It's in the back of your mind, but he's not the first guy to come through and have an injury concern like that. We have no concerns about Max Chadwick today. PFF College Football Analyst. Also, he is over there at Preferred Walk-On. Go check him out. He's at Max Chadwick CFB on Twitter. Max, great to have you on the show. Hope we can do it again one day, my man.
Yeah, this is awesome, Spencer. Again, I really appreciate you being so flexible with this and doing this so last second, man. But yeah, I had an absolute blast talking to you.
Alrighty, then we'll just have to do it again, I guess. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and go Ducks.